There are two kinds of accusations. The ones that come at you directly, where at least you can see them moving and brace yourself. And the ones that travel through a room before they reach you, passed from mouth to mouth, shaped and polished, arriving already believed by everyone present. The second kind is harder to survive. Not because they're stronger, but because by the time you hear them, the verdict is already in. I was 34 years old the Thanksgiving my mother stood at the head of our family table and told 14 people that I had stolen from my grandmother. She didn't use that word. She never used that word. But she said I had drained Grandma's account, that she had proof, and that she didn't know how I could sit there eating sweet potato casserole like nothing had happened. And 14 people who share my blood looked at me, and then looked away, and the room went the particular kind of quiet that means everyone has already decided you're guilty and doesn't want the discomfort of watching you try to explain yourself. I didn't try. I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I finished my plate. I helped clear the table. And 3 days later, I mailed one envelope. But I need to start from before that Thursday, because the Thursday only makes sense if you understand the years that came before it. My name is Delia Hartwell, and I am 34 years old. I am a licensed occupational therapist working at a rehabilitation center in Providence, Rhode Island, where I've spent the last 9 years helping people relearn the mechanics of ordinary life after injury or illness, how to hold a spoon again, how to button a shirt, how to trust a body that has let them down. I am good at it. I am patient in the particular way that the work requires, and I find something deeply satisfying in the small, concrete victories. The 80-year-old man who ties his shoes for the first time after his stroke. The teenage girl who carries her own backpack out the front door. I tell you this because it matters. I am not a person who avoids difficult things. I am not fragile. I am not the kind of woman who needs protecting from hard truths. I am the kind of woman who shows up, does the work, and keeps the records. That last part especially. It matters more than anything else in this story. My grandmother's name was Ruth. She died 14 months before that Thanksgiving, at 87 years old, in the same house she had lived in since 1971 in Cranston. She was a small, precise woman who kept everything organized. Receipts in labeled envelopes, correspondence in dated folders, her financial records in a green accordion file she stored in the drawer beneath the kitchen telephone. She had lived alone since my grandfather died in 2009, and she had managed her own affairs with a thoroughness that I admired deeply, because I recognized it as a woman who had decided that depending entirely on others was a form of risk she was not willing to take. My mother is named Connie. She is 61. She is my grandmother's daughter and in many ways her opposite. Where Ruth was precise, Connie is approximate. Where Ruth documented, Connie remembers selectively. My mother is not a cruel woman in the straightforward sense. She is a woman who has, over the course of her life, built a family narrative in which she is the one who holds everything together, and in that narrative there is very little room for anyone else to be quietly competent.
Especially not me.
My brother Derek is 31. He has always been the easier child, easier to read, easier to please, easier to love in the uncomplicated way my mother prefers. I do not say this with bitterness. I have said it to my therapist, Dr. Anita Rowan, and she helped me understand it without the bitterness. Derek is not complicit in what happened. He is simply someone who has never thought to question the version of events he was given because the version he was given has always served him well. The financial arrangement with my grandmother began 3 years before she died. In January of 2016, she called me on a Tuesday evening and told me, in the careful way she told me things, that she was concerned about the gap between her fixed income and her monthly expenses. Her roof needed repairing. Her heating costs had gone up. She did not want to touch the principal of her savings account, which she intended to leave equally to my mother and her sister Barbara. She asked if I was in a position to help, temporarily, with $300 a month, and she would document it and ensure I was compensated from the estate. I said yes, without hesitation. What she did not tell my mother, what she told me privately, in that same careful way, was that she had asked my mother first, and my mother had said she would think about it, and then never followed up. I only learned this after Ruth died, when I found a small handwritten note in the green accordion file, dated January 8, 2016, in my grandmother's precise cursive. Called Connie Ree, January shortfall. No commitment. Called Delia. Arranged. I kept that note. I kept it along with every bank statement, every transfer confirmation, every piece of documentation my grandmother had organized with her usual thoroughness. Because she had insisted on it. She had said, "You do this for me and I will make sure it is on the record." And she had meant it. $300 a month became $450 when her medical costs increased in 2018. By the time she died, I had transferred a total of $14,372 into her account over 38 months. She had documented every dollar in the green file. And 6 weeks before she died, she had signed an authorization letter, witnessed by her neighbor Patricia and her attorney Gerald Moss, confirming that I had made these transfers as a loan to the estate, to be repaid at settlement before the remaining assets were distributed equally. I had a copy of that letter. I had the bank statements. I had the authorization with her signature and the witness signatures and the date, March 14th, 2019. I did not tell my mother about any of this while my grandmother was alive, because my grandmother asked me not to. She said, in the exact words I can still hear, "Connie will make it complicated, and I don't want complicated. I want taken care of." I honored that. What I did not anticipate was that honoring it would leave me without a defense when my mother decided, 14 months after my grandmother's death, that the estate settlement was taking too long and someone must be responsible. The estate had been in probate for just over a year by the time Thanksgiving came. There was nothing unusual about the timeline. Gerald Moss had told us at the outset that the process would take 12 to 18 months, that there were property assessments and a small investment account to close out, and the standard bureaucratic rhythm of these things. My mother had been impatient from the beginning. She called the attorney's office twice a month. She called me once a week to ask if I had heard anything. I told her each time that no, I had not, and that the process was proceeding normally, and she would exhale in a way that communicated she found my calmness about it suspicious. I understood, later, that the suspicion had been growing for a long time before it had a name. My mother's fear, and it was fear, I understand that now, was not that I had taken something. It was that I knew something she didn't. That there was a version of events involving her own mother that she had not been told, and that the not telling was a kind of judgment. She had always needed to be the one who understood the family's inner workings, who held the information, who was trusted with the difficult things. And my grandmother had trusted me instead. That was the wound under the accusation. Not greed. Not evidence. The wound of being passed over by her own mother for her own daughter. But she did not say any of that at Thanksgiving. What she said was, "I got a call from Gerald's office last week. There's a discrepancy in the account balance going back to 2016. $14,000 that came in and then went out in chunks and nobody can explain it." She looked around the table. I think we all know who is managing Grandma's finances. She looked at me when she said the last part. I looked back at her. "She drained Grandma's account," my mother said, and her voice was the voice of a woman who had convinced herself this was true before she finished the sentence. "I have proof." She didn't have proof. She had a bank statement that showed transfers in, and she had chosen not to look at the full context around them. But 14 people heard the word proof and made the face that people make when they decide someone is guilty. 14 people. My Aunt Barbara, who had loved me since I was small. My cousin Jenny and her husband. My Uncle Pete. Derek, who looked at the tablecloth. My mother's friends Shirley and Ron, who came every year. 3 cousins I saw twice a year at most. A great uncle who was hard of hearing and may not have fully followed what was said but nodded anyway. I did not cry. I did not defend myself. I did not give them the scene they were waiting for, the one that would confirm everything. I picked up my fork. I finished the sweet potato casserole. And after dinner, I helped Shirley rinse the plates, because that was what I always did, and I was not going to stop doing it on account of a lie. I drove home at 9:22 p.m., and I sat in my car in the parking lot of my apartment building for 31 minutes. I want to tell you about those 31 minutes, because they are the part of this story I am most honest about when I tell it. I was not calm. I want to be clear about that because I know how this kind of story can sound, like the protagonist moves through it with a steadiness that most real people don't actually have. I did not feel steady. I felt the particular sensation of having the ground rearranged beneath me while I was standing on it, that specific disorientation of hearing something false stated with confidence in front of people who believe it. I sat in my car at 9:22 p.m. on a Thursday in November. The parking lot light hummed above me. I had the green folder in my tote bag on the passenger seat. I had brought it to the dinner because I had developed, over the past few weeks, a low-level anxiety that I would need it the way you carry an umbrella when the sky is wrong.
I had not expected to need it that night.
I had not expected my mother to say it in front of everyone at the table on Thanksgiving. I picked up my phone to call my friend Carolyn and then put it back down. I picked it up again to call Derek and then thought about what he would say, or rather, what he would not say, and put it back down. I sat for a while with the green folder in my lap, not opening it, just holding it, and I thought about my grandmother in her kitchen with her accordion file and her labeled envelopes, being precise about everything, making sure the record was clean. She had known this might happen. I think she had known. Why else the authorization letter, the witnesses, the signed documentation? She had built a paper trail the way a careful woman builds anything, not dramatically, not with announcements, but quietly, thoroughly, so that if anyone ever needed it, it would be there. I opened the folder at 9:47 p.m. I found the March 2019 bank statement with my grandmother's signature on the authorization letter clipped behind it. I read it once. I clipped it back. I closed the folder. Then I drove home, made a cup of tea, and went to bed. On Friday morning, I called Gerald Moss's office at 8:34 a.m. I spoke to his assistant, a woman named Cheryl, who was brisk and professional, and confirmed that yes, the estate was proceeding normally, and that the transfers I was referring to were fully documented in the estate file, and that my mother's call to the office had been logged and responded to, and that Mr. Moss had already sent her a letter explaining the authorization. I thanked Cheryl. I hung up. Then I drove to the post office on Atwells Avenue. I bought one padded envelope for $2.19. I made a photocopy of the March 2019 bank statement, the one with the transfers clearly marked as loan repayment under the signed authorization, at the machine near the door for 40 cents. I wrote my mother's address on the envelope in my own handwriting. I tucked the copy of the bank statement inside, along with a note that said only, "This is the document Gerald Moss also sent you." Grandma signed it. March 14th, 2019. I did not write anything else. I did not explain. I did not argue or defend or contextualize. I sealed the envelope. I put it in the slot at 9:58 a.m. I went to work. That day I had 5 patients, including a 72-year-old man named Arthur, who was relearning how to use his left hand after a stroke, and we spent 40 minutes working on a particular grip exercise with a soft foam ball, and he got it, finally, on the 41st try, and the look on his face was the look that makes the work worth doing. I drove home at 6:15 p.m. and ate leftovers standing at the kitchen counter. I did not check my phone more than a normal amount. I went to sleep at 10. Saturday was quiet. Sunday was quiet until 5:30 p.m. when my phone lit up with the first call. It was my Aunt Barbara. I let it go to voicemail. Not because I was afraid of the conversation, but because I wanted to hear what she said without needing to respond in real time. She left a message that was 47 seconds long. Her voice was careful, and she said she had received a letter from Gerald Moss, and she had also received my envelope, and she wanted me to know that she believed me, that she had always believed me, and that she was sorry she had not said something at the table on Thursday, and she was going to call Connie. I sat on my couch with my phone in my hand for a moment. Then the second call came. And the third. By 11 p.m. Sunday, there had been 9 calls. My cousin Jenny. My cousin Jenny's husband, separately. My Uncle Pete, who left a message that was mostly throat-clearing and then said, "That wasn't right, what your mother said, and I should have spoken up." 3 other cousins at various levels of apology. Derek called at 8:47 p.m. and said almost nothing for 2 minutes and then said he was sorry and that he hadn't understood what was actually happening and could he come by sometime this week. I said yes. At 11:47 p.m. my phone lit up one more time. It was my mother. I did not answer. I let it ring to voicemail, and I listened to the message in the morning, standing in my kitchen with my Earl Grey tea in the mug with the chip on the handle, the one I keep meaning to replace and never do. Her message was 2 minutes and 14 seconds long. It was not an apology. I want to be honest about that. It was not, in the end, the thing I had spent years in some part of myself hoping to receive. She did not say I was wrong to accuse you. She did not say I'm sorry for saying it in front of everyone. What she said was that Gerald had explained the situation, and that she understood now that there had been documentation she hadn't seen, and that she wished I had told her about the arrangement while Grandma was alive, because it would have saved a lot of confusion. I stood in my kitchen, and I listened to those 2 minutes and 14 seconds, and I thought about my grandmother and her precise, careful way deciding not to tell my mother, and I thought about what that decision had cost, and what it had also, in its way, protected. My mother did not manufacture the accusation from nothing. That is the part that took me the longest to understand, and the part that Dr. Rowan helped me work through over the months that followed. My mother feared being peripheral to her own mother's life. She feared that the trust and closeness that Ruth showed me was evidence that she had somehow failed her mother, been found wanting, been passed over. And rather than sit with that fear, she converted it into a story in which I was the one who had done something wrong. People do this. It is not a defense of it, but it is the truth of it, and understanding the truth of it helped me figure out what I actually wanted from what happened next. What I wanted was not revenge. I want to be clear about that too. I wanted the record to exist. I wanted the 14 people at that table to have access to the same information my mother had chosen to ignore. I wanted to be able to look at myself in the mirror and know I had responded to a lie with the truth, stated plainly, without drama, without destruction. The bank statement did that. The months that followed were not simple. My mother and I had 3 phone conversations between November and March, each one moving a little further into honesty and a little further from the story she had told. She never said the words, "I'm sorry I accused you," in front of everyone. She did say, in February, during a conversation that lasted nearly an hour, that she had not understood how close I was to her mother and that she didn't know how to feel about that. I said I understood. I said I had been close to Ruth because Ruth had let me be, and that I had always wished Connie and I could have that kind of closeness too. There was a silence after that. She said, "I didn't know you felt that way." I said, "I know. We are not where we were. I do not know if we will ever be where I once hoped we could be. But we are somewhere more honest than we have been in years, and I will take that. I will take honesty over performance every single time." The estate settled in March. Per the authorization my grandmother had signed and Gerald Moss had documented, the $14,372 was returned to me from the estate before the remainder was split equally between my mother and Barbara. My mother received her share. She did not comment on the process. Barbara called me the day after settlement and said, "Your grandmother knew what she was doing." I said, "She always did." Barbara said, "She was proud of you." I held that for a long time after we hung up. The green folder is in my filing cabinet now, behind my tax returns, in the place where I keep things I hope never to need, but am glad to have. The kitchen drawer where my grandmother kept her accordion file is empty now, in her house that sold in April, and I think about her sometimes in the particular way I think about people whose precision and care made my life easier, in ways they will never know. She kept the record. She made sure it was clean. She handed me something I could use when I needed it, without ever saying that was what she was doing. That is its own kind of love. I want to say one more thing about what it means to be accused of something you didn't do by someone who should know you better than that. You will want to explain. You will want to defend. You will want to stand up at the table and produce the folder and show every person in the room the evidence before they can finish forming the opinion. I understand that impulse completely. I felt it in my whole body at that table. But the explanation that comes in the moment of accusation almost never lands the way you want it to. It looks like panic. It sounds like guilt. The room has already organized itself around the story it was just given, and your voice is only one voice against the momentum of something that was said with confidence. Some truths need a stage to land. Some truths fit in an envelope. The envelope gave the truth its own moment, unhurried, unchallengeable, arriving in each person's hands separately, to be read privately, without the pressure of the room or my mother's voice filling the space around it. 14 people read the same bank statement. 14 people processed the same signature. Not because I stood up and demanded they look, but because I sent it to them when they were alone, and the evidence could speak for itself. A family will tell you blood is thicker than water until the day blood asks them to give something up. My grandmother gave something up to protect me. She kept a secret she didn't have to keep, built a paper trail she didn't have to build, and trusted that when the time came, the record would be enough. She was right. Some people only know how to love what they can control. My mother's fear of being peripheral, of not being the trusted one, of not being the person her mother called, that fear was real, and it made her reach for a story that gave her control of a situation she felt was out of her hands. I understand it. I have spent months understanding it. Understanding it is not the same as excusing it, but it has made it possible to remain in the same room with her without the kind of cold distance that would have cost me more than the accusation did. Forgiveness is not access. Understanding is not reunion. Compassion is not a key to my front door. The 14 people who were at that table know what happened. The record exists. My grandmother's signature is on a piece of paper that 3 different people witnessed, and a licensed estate attorney filed. You cannot revise that. You cannot revise it no matter how many versions of the story you tell, because eventually the envelope arrives, and the envelope contains the truth, and the truth does not need anyone's permission to be believed. Losing an illusion is still better than living inside one. If someone has told a story about you, one you know to be false, one you have been afraid to challenge because challenging it means disrupting the peace that has always cost you more to maintain than it costs them, I want to ask you something. What documentation do you already have? What did someone careful leave you that you haven't used yet? Because the record matters. It always has.